It is so good to be here, not just because there's a lot of like-minded innovators in the room that are going to solve real problems, I think, today and tomorrow, but because it's also a reunion. There are so many familiar faces and even just familiar names that we've corresponded over email or text or webinar. So to see the face behind the names is really incredible. So happy to be there. Capital Factory, the FSN team, incredible work. Thank you for having me a part of this. So today I'm going to talk to you about Spark. We got a really insightful question earlier about what is Spark, what are the Spark cells. We're going to go deeply into that. And if I've done my job today, you will leave this understanding the why, the how, and the what for Spark, and how to get engaged. So that is why we're here. A little bit of background on me before I jump in though first. Steve Lawver, active duty major, joined in 2011. Married my high school sweetheart. Her name is Lauren. We have a 5-year-old daughter named Jane. As of earlier this month, she's turned 5. Went down to Texas for pilot training and flew the T6, the T38. Went over to Hobart Field, Florida to fly the U-28 with AFSOC for about 4.5 years. And then in 2017, went up to DC where I am now with the stand-up of AFWERX. Right, and so I have had the good fortune of seeing AFWERX grow over the last several years, the trials and tribulation, the evolution. And during that time, I've run 3 different programs. So very briefly, which will lead into Spark as the current one. There's that eye contact I asked for. The first one was the Air Force Accelerator. So this was a program that worked with early stage startup companies to get them to a point at which they were able to work with us sooner in their life cycle. Now, we didn't want to pull them off their commercial vector. We just wanted to gently guide them towards our needs such that they could still grow and succeed commercially, and we could take advantage of those economies of scale while they were working with us just a little bit, at least in the beginning. Also, we could orient our tactics, techniques, and procedures around what they were building so we were ready for it when it did hit the market. So that was the Air Force Accelerator. We hit maybe 10 to 30 companies a pop, which was relatively small. 2018, we stood up the SBIR Open topic. I'm not going to steal the thunder on this one. Jason Rafferty is going to talk to this later today, or perhaps he already has. But suffice it to say, we took those lessons and that empathy we built with the startup and the investment community to try to do it at scale. And what that resulted in was the SBIR Open topic ultimately became a major component of Air Force Ventures. Now, earlier this year, I had the privilege of moving into Spark, and that is what we are going to talk about today. And that is very much focused on our people, our talented Airmen and Guardian innovators, and being able to empower and enable them. Now, strategically, I want to talk a little bit about the imperative for innovation. Why is it important? In fact, is it important? I think I understand, or rather have empathy with, those who would argue against it. They have these high-level priorities in many cases, and to them it can seem like noise, especially in the beginning, when you now have other thousands, hundreds of thousands of individuals who are seeing more problems and trying to solve them. But I immensely feel, strongly feel, that being able to enable and empower those grassroots innovators is critically important for 2 reasons. One is the impact on them as a person. So right now they might be maybe they see something at their level that is, it could be 10% better. And they're trying to navigate how to make a change that does change the Air Force 10% for the better, right? Or at least for their one mission set for their day, right? But if they learn to hack the process, to understand and navigate our bureaucracy, to do design thinking, to do customer discovery, to really align stakeholders behind solving a problem, those skills will follow them in their career. So maybe today it's just a 10% increase to their daily mission, but as they grow, it's operational or strategically relevant. Maybe it's on the joint staff one day, right? So those skills, those tool sets follow them in their career. That is a little bit harder to quantify, at least in the beginning. So here's the second piece that is also critically important: the solutions that they are building, right? Now, those solutions will be tactically relevant by their nature, because if someone at the tactical edge is the one that is developing it, they understand their mission set better than anybody else. I would also argue that they can have a strategic impact as well. And we've seen solutions come through that end up impacting the entire enterprise. Now, I think we can increase the rate at which we have those strategic enterprise level impact solutions coming from the grassroots level through some of the programs that we will talk about today. So there it is. There is a strategic imperative for innovation, and that leads to AFWERX Spark. Now, putting AFWERX in front of that, I want to highlight a key point here. We do not own any of the Spark cells, right? We, in fact, would not exist if not for the will of those innovators across the community who are looking for us to help them, to support them. And that is all that we do. And if we fail at that mission, they'll tell us or they'll go away. So we don't own any one of these cells, rather we empower them. And I'm going to talk a little bit more to that as we go on. Now, what do? We empower innovators and accelerate results. Those of you who are familiar with AFWERX, especially in its early days, will recognize that was our motto. It was connecting innovators, accelerating results. And what we realized at Spark, especially in its current iteration, was that empowerment actually involved multiple activities within that. So we connect, develop, and support innovators. Those are the key activities. And you'll see they support the mission that's above. So we relentlessly inspire and enable airmen and guardians to, one, unleash their potential, the impact on the person, and two, to drive capability development, the solutions that they're building, through these three main activities. That is how we organize our structure. That is our branch structure within Spark. So the network branch, Garrett Custins, I don't know if he's in the room, but he's in the building. Brilliant guy, leads our network branch. And this is all about not just the connectivity itself, but creating an ecosystem that is connected, energized, passionate, and supportive of each other, right? So it's the strength, the health of that network. There's also the development branch. So you've got this connected network of individuals. Let's give them the tools, the mindset, the mental model to be able to innovate effectively. And that's what the development branch does through a number of activities that we'll talk about. And then there's the innovation catalyst branch. This is all about that supporting activity, helping people get projects across the finish line or at least further along in that. Next slide, or actually, Steve, next slide. Spark programs, how do we get after those efforts, right? I'm gonna go down through each of these now. Connect. The Spark cells we've alluded to a little bit. There are over 80 autonomous, decentralized Spark cells across the world. In fact, later in a slide, we'll see a map of them, and it's truly phenomenal. It's a phenomenon in of itself, right? So they have grown on their own volition. We don't own a single one of them, but we support both the creation of new cells and those cells that already exist, making them more effective at what they do day to day, right? There's also the MAGCOM cells. Right? So these are MAGCOM aligned. They are vary in structure in that every MAGCOM has their own organizational structure and intention for these cells. But suffice it to say, a general rule is that these MAGCOM innovation cells are helping to create scaling pathways such that when there is a grassroots innovation that shows promise, it has a way to seek funding and to scale across the enterprise. Colliders, the question that came up in the last talk about how do we connect these thousands of industry players coming through things like Air Force Ventures with the hundreds of thousands of Air Force end users and customers. The Collider program is meant to get after that. Now, it's still getting its legs under it, and in fact, the final form won't necessarily be an event or a virtual tool. We're trying to find out what is the right combination of tools and events to be able to efficiently connect those end users and customers with those solution providers. Right? So right now, this takes the form of a monthly Collider event that brings together the current SBIR open topic portfolio with end users and customers across the DAP. The DAP, I think we will move towards a virtual presence that is using things like AI, ML, and NLP to more efficiently connect those companies with those customers and end users. So there's a lot going on there. Develop, the second branch. So first off, again, this is about training and developing those airmen and guardian innovators. The internship program enables AFWERX cadets and USAFA cadets to work with actual innovations that are occurring throughout the force to help them solve problems. The beauty is for those cadets is that they now enter the Air Force when they do, having already cut their teeth on that innovation project. So we do 3 cycles per year. It is aligned with those semesters, fall, spring, and summer. The AFWERX Fellowship. This is a 5-month program that takes airmen and guardians, civilian and military, to embed with us for 5 months, during which time they're receiving structured curriculum and they are taking on priority efforts within the AFWERX team. So they're both joining us as a teammate and they're getting that directed attention on them to improve their skills, i.e. they are learning through doing as well. We've done a number of cycles of this now, and we do 3 cycles per year. Right? There are 5 months of pop. What that means is there's a 1-month overlap where we can have continuity between the incoming and the outgoing as well. Defense Ventures Fellowship. Is there anyone in the room that's done this, by the way? Sometimes I've got one hand. Was it a good program? It was awesome. Yeah, phenomenal program. And so this actually takes airmen and guardians, actually across the DOD, the federal government, to embed with investment firms and startups for 6 weeks, during which time they're learning some of the secret sauce of how do you manage a portfolio, how do you invest in early stage technologies, things they all can bring back to their home units afterward as a new skill that they've acquired. Innovation courses. So we are building out our team internally, being able to execute this, but to this point, we have just sponsored efforts and helped pay for people to travel to other efforts that are already out there. Cap, hey Rays, one of the developers of a course called Design Warfare out of Global Strike Command. If you have not gone through this course, I highly, highly recommend it if and when there's another course that's launched. But it is roughly a month long that is taking airmen and guardians through this process of design thinking, through customer discovery, stakeholder alignment, through how do you pitch a project and seek advocacy at the right levels. And it really has created a cult-like following of anyone who goes through it. So really, really powerful in nature. It is just one example of a course that we have supported, and we're trying to build up more innate capabilities as well. Virtual tools and training. This is an acknowledgement that some people cannot go TDY for a month or a week. And if we can just give them a little bit to start now, that will, I guess, whet their appetite a little bit. And it can also be a forcing function for who at the very top of the funnel is showing promise and might be a good candidate for one of these in-person events or training courses as well. And then augmentee opportunities. So these are large, bold, kind of audacious efforts where we're trying to accomplish a hard task by leveraging lots and lots of people from across the department. So case in point, with the Air Force Ventures open topic, thousands of proposals every round. The only way to do that in such a short period for those evaluations is to have 1,000 plus evaluators as well from all career fields, subject matter areas, and similar. So that is one example of where we leveraged augmentees to accomplish a major task. Another one is for Spark Tank evaluations, right? We leveraged that augmentee network to get after those later this year. Another one, we talked a little bit about Sherpas in that previous talk. We're leveraging that same network to say, okay, when phase 1 companies for SBIR, as an example, are awarded, can we get people who actually work with them on a part-time or full-time basis to usher them through that process? And that is where augmentees may come into play as well. We cast that as a development opportunity, again, because learning through doing is the goal. And then finally, support. This branch is the Innovation Catalyst branch. Spark Tank is the first one that many people, raise their hands. Does anyone know Spark Tank? I got actually head nods. I should ask for that. So lots of head nods and some hands over here. So Spark Tank, it really has benefits that are twofold. And it's an annual competition that is meant to elevate and assist those innovators that are coming up from the grassroots level. It really starts as a tiered selection process at the MAGCOM and then ultimately up at the headquarters, where those winners, those semifinalists and finalists, are then given top cover advocacy and in some cases a stage where they can pitch the thing that they are looking to solve. And again, these are Airman and Guardian innovators who are now getting that advocacy and support. So those two benefits that I talked about were, one, we're creating these, I like to think of as innovation heroes, right? If we can make a hero out of those people who are removing barriers actively and succeeding in that, it helps us create a virtuous cycle of innovation where more people want to do it. The second benefit now is those individuals themselves are getting that support, and there's a higher likelihood that their project ultimately gets across the finish line is the goal. So that's Spark Tank. It's been around a few years. The Innovation Strike Team is a new team at AFWERX. I'm so proud to announce this one. We now have a resident capability of innovators who you can reach out to them if you have issues, right? And this actually varies in the amount of involvement that they give. It could be just you want someone to reach out to say, I have a question, or I hit this barrier. Can you help provide advocacy, perhaps at a senior level, to try to remove this barrier? Or it can even go as far as co-program management, where they say, this is a highly disruptive project. We will actually work with you on a regular basis from week to week to get it across the finish line. So John leads the team, phenomenal. I'm really happy to announce this one. Along those same lines is the collective. So what we have acknowledged is that through all these programs I've talked about, whether the fellowship, the internship, the design warfare program, the augmentee ops, the Spark Tank finalist, someone who's been in a Spark cell and run one, or perhaps a MAGCOM cell, there is so much expertise, so much talent and passion. This is a way that we can help to focus and leverage all of that expertise to help other Airman and Guardian innovators. So we're trying to create an unstructured way for Airman and Guardian innovators to engage with this veteran innovator network. And that is going to be via something called the Collective. By the way, at the end of this, I'm going to talk about how you can learn more and engage with all of these topics. I'm going to save the incubator for last, but jumping a little bit further down, products and tools. This is an acknowledgement too that the tools that we create can actually go a very long way in helping to improve the efficacy of that innovation process. And there are people throughout the force who are developing their own tools virtually that can get after that mission. One example is AFIMSC. They created a tool called Vision. It's doing very well, but we can help to be advocates for those solutions, to develop them further, and then to proliferate them throughout the force. Backing up to the incubator. So this is one I'm very excited about. You're going to hear later about, within the Air Force Ventures portfolio, a program called StratFi, or Strategic Fund Increase. The intention of that program is ultimately to be, okay, we need to have a major investment that we can make at the end of the pipeline if an innovation is showing true promise. So they are stair-stepping up the amount of investment that they provide, ultimately with up to $15 million has been the precedent set. We want to have the same thing for our people, right? If a person develops something, maybe they're just kind of tinkering at first, that's great. If it's starting to show some promise, can we make a little bit bigger investment in them via top cover, resources, time? But what happens when they have a truly impactful innovation that needs a lot of time to implement? That is where the incubator comes into play. So we want those high potential innovators to have a place to go for 6 months to 3 years is the goal. And during that time, they are building their own thing, but supported by the full infrastructure of not only AFWERX, but I also want to briefly mention a team that is called Morpheus. In fact, if you're on Morpheus, can you raise your hand in the room? There they are. So this is a small team. It's brand new. And I won't step on the mission statements. Things are evolving highly. But the way that I came to interpret their existence was tying more effectively the strategic level down to the tactical level and creating pathways and a paradigm that allows those two to be more meshed with each other effectively. And I will say, even though they're young, the thing that they're doing incredibly well so far is staffing with a very strong team. Right? And so I just want to highlight that the incubator that we are bringing to bear is not per se an AFWERX program only. There are some really strong partners that are engaged. They work directly for the vice chief, which is also a major plus. And so again, bringing people out for long periods of time, supported by the entire infrastructure that we can bring to bear so that those truly strategically beneficial solutions can make it to the field. And that is the incubator. And this is meant to be also like a document that you can print out. So I know there's a lot of words in that. This one, I'm not going to belabor each of these, but just to say that the intent here is to say with all those things that I just talked about, who are they most useful to? And you can see on the left an airman or guardian with a specified idea looking for a way to implement or scale. You can see which ones apply. The same for someone who just wants to get connected to the community and be a part of it. And then finally for a commander who's looking to foster that innovation at their base. All right, this is, I think, the second to last slide. I've already touched on this a little bit. Again, that StratFly model for our people. But I wanted to highlight there is a whole plethora of tools that you can engage with. If you're just an innovator that's looking to get started, you can go talk to your Spark cell. Maybe you can stand up a Spark cell at your base if there's not one already. You can do something like the Design Warfare Bootcamp, which is a one-week version of that full Design Warfare course. You can use some of the virtual training that we talked about. You can be an augmentee. You can apply for Spark Tank. There are a lot of things that you can do today. On that medium investment size, that deeper learning and support, you've got things like engaging with the MAGCOM programs, which all are different, right? The AFWERX Fellowship, which is a 5-month investment of time. The Defense Ventures Fellowship that we talked about, embedding with venture firms and startups. The Design Warfare 1-month course. And so you're seeing here that there's this stair step of engagement that we can do, ending finally with the Spark Incubator. And then the Strike Team, we talked about that possibility for co-PMing efforts alongside them. This is my last slide. I wanted to highlight just the scope and the breadth of the Spark network. Again, this is really the heartbeat of Spark. Even though we have all these other programs, we live and die by those airmen and guardian innovators that are distributed throughout the force. And so common characteristics, they are owned by their commanders, typically a direct report to the wing commander, aligned with the MAGCOM as the objective, supported by us at AFWERX. They often manage the squadron innovation funds for their installation. And a common kind of a guide for the size of these units is 1 lead, 1 deputy, and then 2 other members on the team. All we're here to do is support them. And that's it. I know that was a lot. I want to have some time for questions.
And we have questions. I'm going to join here for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You know, as you talk about that also here in the audience and online, be sure you throw your questions in the chat so we can get your questions answered, because I know there's a lot of them here present in the Capital Factory. If you have a question, just raise your hand. We'll get you the microphone. But I'll start with this one, Steve.
Yeah.
So when you talk about engaging with the innovators, the ground level, the tactical level, right? People that see the challenges, the problems every single day, they know what they're working through. They know what it is that they need. A lot of times we talk about culture, but why is Spark so important to the foundation of the culture that will enable this to move forward in the Air Force?
All right, that is so important. Okay, there's been this, I think, understanding across commercial enterprise, now across the DOD, that ideas are crap and execution is everything. And so I really think that the difference between that just an idea and something you're actually going to solve is pain and sweat and tears and also passion, right? And so that passion is when you're mowing the lawn or showering or going for a run, you're thinking about, how do I make this thing work? Yeah. And I would say that a culture of people that have psychological safety to know I can pursue this thing and I won't be crushed if it fails, of knowing that if they build something that is meaningful, it can and will scale, it starts to create this excitement and this passion around executing these innovation projects. And, you know, I mentioned the psychological safety thing. I would say one of the hardest things for being an innovator is you're kind of going against the grain, and having a network of people who will take care of you, who you can commiserate with, and then you can just come together with to execute is so important.
And you know, one of the things that even earlier today, General Holt had mentioned, he said, listen, sometimes we got to acknowledge the hard points about the Air Force, the place that we have to grow. And this is one of the things I love about Spark, as we talk about Spark, is it's the area that we realize that we're changing the dynamics of how our Air Force is operated. You know, there's a lot of things about the Air Force that need to be able to grow and enable us to enable these airmen in the mindset, in the space, in the culture, and then how do we capitalize on that? How do we enable them to do that without stifling that innovative experience? And then online, we're coming to you with your questions. We see them. If you don't mind diving into that.
Oh gosh, I love this conversation. So a big theme that I care about is empowerment, not ownership. I think there's a tendency to want to centralize things, to say like, look, the reason that projects don't make it across the finish line is because we didn't have enough control. I would argue that's not true. In fact, the incentive structure is the really important thing. So how do you encourage innovation? You create either pots of money or resources or time or advocacy. There are certain rules around how you tap into that at the operational and strategic level. You communicate that very effectively down to the grassroots level. And then you don't stop them if they're doing something that isn't in line with one of those strategic bets. But you now know that you're incentivizing them to build things that are also operationally and strategically relevant. So I guess my answer would be create incentive structures such that if someone builds something that is useful at the enterprise level, it can scale. And there's the expectation that it will.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we see not only in the Spark cells, but a lot of times when people consider the SIBR process and how people get involved in the SIBR process through that, the entire plan of what that looks like. Oftentimes they're working with Spark cells to be able to solve the problems at the user level, which is amazing because how many times in development do we try to get an answer from individuals who are connected closest to the problem area? And that's exactly what the Spark cells are.
Yes, 100%. So that is an immensely valuable asset and resource. And again, the thing I keep going back to though, is it's not like a pool from which we can just like we ask and ask and ask and ask. The reality is we need to add value back into that pool to even be able to leverage that ecosystem. It is a balancing act for sure.
Yeah, it is. Any questions here regarding Spark here in the audience and then also online? Yeah, we have one right here. Okay.
Hi,
Yep.
Hey,
for the online audience.
Oh, gotcha.
Online. Yep.
Hi, I started a company a few years ago. Ended up hiring a lead electrical engineer who just so happened to be a captain in the Air Force. And I'm just now finding out about all of this. I'm working on making him an Air Force innovator now. I just want to know what route should I take to help him in his career so that we can come out and continue doing great work for me.
Oh gosh, so my first recommendation there would be what base is he at? Do you know? Eglin. Oh gosh, that's the jackpot. So there's someone who's there named Kathy Reed who runs that Spark cell.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have an answer for that one too. I will say one of the biggest challenges we face is mobility of innovators, right? It's this idea that even when you hit that jackpot individual with that jackpot project, we often don't have an established process to move them effectively to the place or the project that we want them to be working on. I think that the Morpheus team is one example that is doing great progress to that end. I think it's a collective effort though on how do we create structures, whether it's a career path or just something that's a little bit less formal, that streamlines this mobility of our innovators. That to me is one of the white whales I think in the innovation space right now. But it's a really good question.
Great question. Any other questions here? Capital Factory. Okay, online we have one question real quick online. When you talk about Spark cells, how else, I think probably from an industry perspective, how can members of our audience that are there, how can they help us with our goals? Specifically talking about Spark, that kind of ecosystem, the grassroots, the tactical, helping and empowering them. How can industry best help that initiative within Spark of AFWERX? Yeah,
really good question. So this idea of developing and educating innovators, it's not a new thing. Right? It's kind of new in some areas to the DoD, really not even new there, but it's different spins on it. What I'm driving at is that in commercial industry, there are entities that exist to help startups like flourish and thrive and scale, right?
Yeah.
We are creating startups. We're creating intrapreneurs, or rather enabling intrapreneurs within the force. So if you are an industry and you have a solution or a training or something that can help innovators be more effective, that's one thing that I think might make sense. For those that are in the DoD that are listening, I think every agency has a role to play. I mean, whether it's from policy or TTPs or capability development or sustainment of a solution. The reality is that we only succeed when all of those nodes are connected to each other. And so regardless of who you are, having you as just part of that network who is willing, especially to work with someone whose idea is not yet perhaps polished. And so I would say expanding your risk portfolio or understanding a little bit to be able to work with someone who's not quite 100% ready to scale yet will help them get to that point faster. And so DoD, any agency, whatever you're in, I would love to have you as part of the network. Industry, if you can solve that particular problem, I think it's pretty helpful as well.
That's huge. Awesome. Thank you so much to AFWERX Spark for being with us. Steve, thanks so much if you don't mind taking that.
Oh, of course.
As we do that, and thank you so much to all of our online participants as well, because we do have our next speaker, which is amazing, coming up here now. It's going to be virtually specific. So those of you who are in Capital Factory, you have about a 20-minute